You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Julie Ryan. She's an author of Angelic Attendants. We're going to talk about what really happens when we pass away, when we die. So I think it'll be a very interesting call. I've spoken to Raymond Moody and a few other people in the near-death experience world. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of overlap here. So welcome, Julie. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how did you get interested in this topic? Besides, we should all be interested in this topic. Otherwise, death may be a very scary experience. But, you personally, what got you interested in this?
Well, I'm a businesswoman, Richard, and an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world, and a serial entrepreneur. I founded 9 companies in 5 industries. And so I tell people I'm a businesswoman who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. And one of the things that I learned, and again, I am not one of those psychics that had people chasing her since childhood, or if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with that information. I discovered once I connected with spirit that you can do it all. You can communicate with spirit. I do a lot of healing work, Richard. I'm like a human MRI. I can see inside people's bodies with their permission, of course, and facilitate energetic healings to help them heal themselves. And as part of that, we can communicate with spirit. We can tell how close to death somebody is. We can do past life stuff, talk to angels, whomever. And I teach people all over the world how to do this. So I started investigating this about more than 30 years ago. And when my own mother was dying in 2002, my heart was breaking because it was very unexpected. And at the same time, I turned on my radar and I was seeing the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets and lots of angels in the room. And I thought, okay, there's more to the story than meets the eye here. And
all of a sudden you started seeing them?
Well, with my mother, when she was dying, that was the first time I'd ever been around anybody who was dying before.
Okay.
And so since that time, I've seen it thousands of times and helped thousands of families when they have a loved one transitioning. And I've coined it the 12 phases of transition. And it's how spirits and angels and pet spirits are the configuration of them in the room when somebody's dying, and the phases that everybody goes through when they're dying.
Well, yeah, you mind doing an overview, like what happens, what's like first few phases and what happens in the spirit world and all that when someone's, getting closer to passing away?
Yeah, sure. Well, the interesting thing about all of this, let me preface it by saying there's university-based research now that shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're getting closer to departing, to dying. And so what happens is the spirit exits the body. We all hear that we're spirits attached to a body having a human experience. And the spirit, it detaches from the body and it comes out the top of the head. It looks like a speech bubble on a cartoon, and then it stays attached. And then the deceased maternal spirit closest to the person who's dying shows up first. That surprised me, Richard. I thought maybe God had a department in heaven, kind of like the death department. And he'd say, okay, Susie Q's dying in Seattle, dispatch some angels to go help. That's not what I perceive. It's the maternal spirit closest to the person who's dying who really runs the show from the spirit world.
Oh, you mean like if they're closest to their mother or grandmother or daughter or something like that, that's who would appear?
No, it's always the maternal spirit. It's either the mother who birthed the person who's dying, or if the person was adopted, it's the adopted mother, or the woman that assumed that role. Let's say somebody was raised by an aunt or a grandmother or another woman. It's whoever the female person is that raised that person when they were little is the one that runs the show from the spirit world. And that surprised me a lot.
So, I mean, runs the show. What do they summon other ones, or what are they?
Yeah, exactly. They bring in the angels. They bring in the spirits of other deceased loved ones and pets. Yeah, it's really interesting.
How do you know they're orchestrating it? Do you see them like calling or?
Yeah, yeah. You can tell they're large and in charge. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is happening when the person is literally has passed or way before or?
When they're in the process of dying. There's lots of information out there about near-death experiences, about the afterlife, about past lives even, but there's not much information available about what's happening when somebody's actually dying. And that's the thing that scares most people because we don't know what's happening.
Right.
And not only when we're going through that with a loved one, there's a part of us going, oh my, I'm going to be there myself one day. What's that going to be like? So this takes the fear out of it for people and for families, especially when we can describe who the loved one's spirits are that are there. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee.
But wait a minute, you must have been present at someone that was dying that was a real, let's say a really bad person. What happens to them?
Same thing, because all spirits are pure love. That's a role that they're playing in this lifetime.
It's not like the movie Ghost where black hands grab them and drag them down the hell.
No, everybody goes to heaven. There was a movie in the 1980s called All Dogs Go to Heaven. Well, all people go to heaven too. Yeah, we play roles in each lifetime, and sometimes those roles are of sinister people. And those people, their spirits are all pure love too, and they go to heaven too. What I've heard a bazillion times from spirit, Richard, is that there's no right or wrong in the spirit world. It's just an experience. Now, there's right or wrong, good or evil in our human experience because we are here to be able to create. And in order to create, we need to know what we don't want in order to create what we do want. And so that's like if you've ever heard a famous actor be interviewed and they'll say, the interviewer will say, what was your favorite role that you ever played? It's always the bad guy because there are so many nuances that go.
You notice no difference between the nicest person you've ever met versus the worst?
Yeah, no difference in their spirit. Their spirit's always pure love. It's just a role they're playing. It's kind of like when you see the worst person you've ever met in heaven, you can give them an Oscar and say, man, you were so good in that role. You were just awful. And it's a role that we play. Yeah.
Why would some people want to play the role if it's so bad?
Well, I think it gives them the perspective of the other side of the equation. Let's say if somebody was murdered in a lifetime and then they want to come back and they want to be a murderer because they want to see, well, what the heck does it take for somebody to murder somebody else? What's that thinking like? What are all the variables that go into somebody becoming a murderer? And what Spirit has told me countless times is, again, there's no right or wrong, no good or bad in the spirit world. It's just an experience. And you figure each experience you have expands your frame of reference, expands your spirit. And that's a big leap from our Judeo-Christian teachings that we've had for the past however many thousands of years. And yet that's the thing I hear over and over and over again from Spirit.
All right, so the closest maternal spirit comes, orchestrates. What happens is there a gathering of spirits, and then they take that person's spirit with them, or what happens?
Yeah. There's a circle of angels that forms around the person who's dying, and the parental spirits are, let's say, just for conversation's sake, the dying person is in a bed. So let's say they're at the foot of the bed, and the angels are around in a circle. The person who's dying with the parent spirits anchoring that circle. And then as the dying person gets closer and closer to death, that circle opens into a horseshoe and eventually a straight line across the foot of the bed. And more spirits come in as part of what I have called the welcome to heaven committee, and then pet spirits come in. And about phase 6, Richard, there's 2 extra angels that show up, and they are on either side of the spirit bubble, as I call it, back to that cartoon speech bubble. And about phase 9, after phase 9, their wings start to move. And when they move, it creates a vortex above the dying person's head. And it feels like a car wash at the end when you get to the dryer part where it's sucking all the water off your car. There's a very strong upward pull, suction, if you will. And it's created by the wings of the angels on either side of the vortex. You'll hear in near-death experiences and other writings about the end of life that often somebody will go through a black hole or a vortex. And that's what they're talking about. And then as the spirit gets through the vortex, then those angels escort that spirit to heaven. Interesting thing about that vortex, when I was writing my book, Angelic Attendants, I just for kicks did an internet search on owl wings vortex, because the movement of the angel's wings is very slow and methodical and silent. It reminded me of a giant owl. And come to find out, there's an aeronautical engineering phenomenon called the wingtip vortex, which is how air goes over and under wings of anything that flies, whether that be a jet or a plane or a bird or a bug or a kite or whatever. And it forms a vortex underneath the wing and it causes upward lift. I had never heard of that before, but every pilot knows all about the wingtip vortex. And if you do a search, you will find thousands and thousands of articles and images and pictures and diagrams about the wingtip vortex. So I thought that was interesting, that something that I saw happening in the spirit world when my mother was dying was something that was similar, or was the same thing that was created in the aeronautical engineering world as well. Furthermore, the 12 phases of transition, all these different phases at my mother's funeral, reminded me of a prayer that said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral, and that is called in paradisum, which in Latin means into paradise. And in the prayer, it says, the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. And I thought, all right, that's what I saw happen. But I heard that prayer in a completely different light. I'd heard it many times before. So in writing the book, I researched where did that prayer originate and learned that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. So I have to believe, Richard, that perhaps it took till the 5th century for people to be well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly back then, those people were men, oftentimes acting as scribes and living in monasteries and synagogues as monks. So I thought, well, maybe people have been able to see this since the beginning of time. Yeah. And I'm seeing it now. Another fun story about this, if I may.
Well, have you found evidence in literature that people have seen this for a long time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's in Plato's Republic and Shakespeare's King Lear and all kinds of other literature. Yeah, throughout the ages. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, you had another story you were going to relate.
Yeah, how the book came about was a few years after my mom died, I was having a healing done on me by my mentor. And when that's happening, my loved one's spirits are in the room and they line both sides. I'm on a table face up and she's doing a healing on me. So one day, Richard, this spirit of this dead Pope walked in and he has Pope hat on and his shepherd's rod and the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm Clement. And I said, oh, I've never heard of a Pope Clement. Now, I went through 12 years of Catholic schools. And he laughed and he said, well, I was number 6. I said, okay, great. How may I help you? And he said, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies. And I said, I'm a businesswoman. I'm not doing that. People will think I'm nuts. And he laughed again and he said, yeah. Just get on with it. Everything you've done in your career has prepared you for this. And so I said again, well, thank you for stopping by, but I'm really not interested. And when I went to my car to leave, Richard, just for kicks, I looked him up on my phone. And what I learned was Pope Clement VI was in office during the Black Plague when 2/3 of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. I thought, okay, I can't make that up. I never heard of that.
Yeah, it makes more sense now, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been really interesting.
Well, I mean, what other kinds of things have you learned? Are you able to query the spirits, or like summon them at the will and, ask them questions and stuff?
Yeah. That's all part of the buffet of psychicness. And I've taught hundreds of people from 15 countries around the world how to do the same thing. We turn our abilities on and off at will. And it helps us integrate spirituality into practicality. We blend the two, and it helps us live a life of purpose and joy in our human experience. So, yeah.
What about some people that may say, according to my faith, you're not supposed to talk to spirits, that's demonic or something, Have you had people say that to you, or will you ever run into that?
Yeah, but then I send them a link to a papal bull, which was like a bulletin kind of a thing that Pope Francis sent out in 2016 to all of his pastors around the world, telling them that he wanted them to welcome psychics and healers because they were doing the work of the Holy Spirit. And many, many churches of all denominations and synagogues give a copy of my book to families that come in to plan a funeral, or if they have somebody at the end of their lives. My Catholic parish gives one to everybody that comes in, and my pastor has told me on more than one occasion that he has my book sitting next to his bed on his nightstand. So they know it resonates. They know that the historical documentation is there. They know that the university-based research is validating everything that I'm talking about. And they know that most medical providers, most hospice workers, even funeral directors, along with most families, have had a situation with a dying loved one saying they could see the spirit of, let's say, their deceased mother who'd been dead for 50 years. And so it's so common that people know that it resonates with them and know that there's a really good chance it's true because of all of this validation and corroboration.
When someone's going through the stages of death, are they able to now all of a sudden communicate with these spirits, even if they've never seen them before?
Yeah, most of the spirits that are showing up are people that they know, loved ones who've passed and pet spirits who've passed. I was working with a client recently, Richard, and her husband was dying, and there were all these African animals, like, safari animals in the room, giraffes and elephants and lions and tigers. And I said to her, I don't know that I've ever seen those kinds of animals bedside when somebody was dying. And she was in North Carolina and I'm in Alabama. And she said, well, that makes perfect sense because my husband was in the Peace Corps for 10 years in Africa, and he was around those animals all the time. So I thought that was really sweet that the animals that he was around, perhaps in a refuge of some sort, were there. Their spirits were there as part of the Welcome to Heaven committee. The other thing that's important to remember too, Richard, is time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. So everybody goes through, it's been my experience, everybody goes through the 12 phases of transition, regardless of how they die, whether it's instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether it's over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years. And that gives a lot of comfort to families, especially when they have a loved one who dies alone. During COVID, a lot of people weren't able to be with their family members because they were in the hospital or a nursing home and they weren't allowed to go in. And also people who have like Gold Star families, people who have family members that were in the military and they passed, or, families who've lost a loved one and their loved one did seemingly die alone. Nobody ever dies alone. And that's a big leap. That brings a lot of comfort to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you hear audible talk or crosstalk between the person dying and the other spirits, or the spirits amongst themselves?
Yeah, I can hear that when I'm tuned in, when I have my radar on. I turn my abilities on and off at will. It's a nanosecond, and that's what I teach as well. I have lots of opportunities for people to learn this stuff if they're interested, both online self-paced and also in-person classes. And it's kind of like you walk up to a couple of people having a conversation and you listen to their conversation, and you can join the conversation if you want. It's exactly the same as it is in our human form.
What are some things that you heard them saying? Are they just coffee shop, or what are they doing?
Tens of thousands of conversations over the years. Well, it depends on if the person with whom I'm working has a specific question for their loved one. We'll hear that. And that can range from they're saying something about, last night I had somebody call into my show. My Ask Julie Ryan show is every Thursday night at 8 Eastern, and people call in from all over the world and partake in the buffet of psychicness. It's a blast. And I had a guy call in, and his grandmother's spirit was present, and she was talking about how when he was a little boy, she made him peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And she said, oh, that boy loved crunchy peanut butter. That boy wouldn't eat a sandwich unless it had crunchy peanut butter. And her grandson, who's now in his probably late 50s, early 60s, was just cracking up, Richard. He goes, she is absolutely right. I wouldn't eat a PB&J unless it had crunchy peanut butter. So Spirit's going to give us amazing ways, and that's something very simple, certainly, but to let us know that it's really them with whom we're communicating.
The pets are there as pets, like hanging out.
Yeah, they are. There was a woman that called into the show week before last, and her mother was dying. And so I was telling her who the spirits were that were adjacent to her mom's bed. And I said, and there's this big black dog, kind of looks like a standard poodle. And I said, but I get that the dog was really close to her, but the dog it's telling me it was the neighbors. And the woman calling into the show said, that's true. She said, it was the neighbor's dog. My mom loved this dog as a child. The neighbors moved to a different home, and the dog was so miserable, and so was my mom as a child. The neighbors came back and gave the dog to my mom, and my mom had the dog for the rest of its life. So it's really interesting the things that Spirit will tell us that we will get. Like, it don't mean anything to me, but it means something to the person with whom I'm working. I was talking to a woman yesterday, and she was telling me that her dad passed, and a couple of days later, she was on her way to church to plan the funeral, and she stopped in a bookstore. And she said while she was in there, this big dictionary that was very, very thick and heavy fell off the shelf on its own. Nobody was around it. And she said it made this big thud to the point where everybody in the store looked and was like, okay, what's going on here? And she said at that exact moment, on the stereo somewhere over the rainbow, the song started playing. And she said not only was that her father's favorite song, but it was part of the music that they had planned to request for his funeral. And again, she was on her way to plan his funeral. So she said, I knew that was my dad saying, I'm with you, thank you for doing this for me, and all of that. So I have tens of thousands of stories like that, Richard.
For you, is any part of the your own spirit, committee accessible to you, or they're not going to be accessible until the point that you're ready to pass?
Oh, no. We can talk to any spirit at any moment. Whether it's attached to a body or not is irrelevant. Whether we knew them or not is irrelevant. Yeah, our heads are like big satellite dishes, and they receive and transmit frequencies, and every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. So if you want to talk to anybody, whether you knew them or not, who do you want to talk to? Moses, Elvis, Napoleon, Mother Teresa, it doesn't matter. You just think of them and they immediately come in, and it's like a two-way radio communication is open. and you just say something, and how you know they're answering you is it's that first thought that comes in your head fast as you can snap your fingers, or sometimes even before, because back to time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. They've already got what we're thinking and they're responding to it. That's how I communicate and work with people when I'm doing my healings. As I mentioned, I'm like a human MRI. And so my spirit connects to their spirit. And then it's like I'm looking at an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI, and I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, or whatever, and then help facilitate energetic healing to help the person heal themselves, because nobody ever heals anybody else. No doctor or medical provider or healer like me. We all help everybody heal themselves. If you think about, you got a big cut on your leg and you go to the emergency room, you get stitches. Well, the doctor that's stitching your leg isn't going to make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. They're helping you heal yourself. And that's how all this works. It's all part of the healing equation.
So, like, now are people, you're not in the middle of dying, are your spirits around you? You
Always.
see them or what?
Always. Spirits are always around every one of us all the time. Yeah.
If someone's not aware of this, do they experience the spirits around them? Are they influenced by them, or it's until they know how to, do most people first ever have any conversation with them only when they're dying? Like, what happens as you go throughout your life? Like, do they influence you? Do you communicate with them? Are you influenced by them? What is the average person's experience that doesn't know any of this?
Yeah, most people are communicating with their spirits, but they don't know that they are. They're not aware of it. And back to that, our heads are big satellite dishes, and they receive and transmit frequencies, and every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. I use the analogy, Richard, of think of satellite TV. Satellite TV is broadcasting who knows how many thousands of programs simultaneously. And depending on where your channel is tuned, that's going to determine what show you're going to receive. So it's the same thing in spirit communication. If you're watching satellite TV and you're watching, let's say, a NASCAR race, well, you don't even know that there's a bowling tournament happening simultaneously, on another channel, because you're not tuned to that channel. So what I teach people to do is how to tune to that channel. It's not hard. Everybody can do it. I would say all little children do it. They are very intuitive. They communicate with and can see spirits. And then about the age of 6 or 7, their grown-ups start to say, when they talk about it, they'll say, "Oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not really true." And they learn to shut it down and learn to discount it. But the stories of little children, actually, I have a series of children's books called Angel Messages for kids, for dogs, for cats, and for truth. And it came from so many parents and grandparents saying to me over the years, how does my grandson, who's 3 years old and can't read yet, how does he know information about a past life that he says where he was, a Civil War soldier, and he can tell us what his regiment was and where he was stationed and who his commanding officer was and stuff. And they say, this kid can't read yet. Or that's what Raymond Moody talked about that. Or how is it that my child knows information about my grandfather who died 20 years before my child was born? And he says grandpa comes and plays trains with him at night, and he can describe what my grandfather looks like. He's never even seen a picture of him. And then my favorite is, how do we explain to little Susie that grandma's in heaven now? And she says, no, she's not. She's asleep in that box in the front of their room because they're at the funeral home for the visitation hours. So little children, we all come in with the software, Richard. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it.
Interesting. So how do people listening, take the first action? What should they do? To get your book or contact you? Like, what's the best way to get started?
Yeah, AskJulieRyan.com is the best way to find me. And if you want a free copy of my book, you can find it on my website, AskJulieRyan.com. We're on all the social media channels. We are on YouTube. We do a live show every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. We do a YouTube live stream simultaneously, and that's fun. People call in with all kinds of questions. It's like a crapshoot every week. So much fun. And Angelic Attendants understands what really happens as we transition from this life into the next. If you want a free copy, just go to julieryangift.com, julieryangift.com, and we'll send you a free digital and audiobook download. We also have it in Spanish if you prefer that. And I think this stuff should be taught in the schools, Richard. And so that's why I give away tens of thousands of books every year for free.
No, that's great. Well, excellent. Julie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And, I really appreciate you being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.